please touch these lips of clay, Lord. Please touch these people, Lord. Please help the words that you've given me to touch their hearts, not just their minds. Please help what Paul did and what you've said, Lord. Please help that to just strike a chord in their hearts and touch them. Okay. So guys, today I'm going to mainly be talking about Acts 17, 16 through 34. In 8th grade, my teacher made me memorize this passage of Scripture, and ever since then, it's just really spoken to me what Paul has done. And I'm going to start off with another verse. I'm just going to read it. You guys don't have to flip there. But it's Romans 1:16. I'm not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes, first for the Jew, then for the Gentile. So now if you would all like to, it'll be up on the screen, Acts 17. Now just a little bit of history behind this. This is happening on Paul's second missionary journey. Paul had just been escorted to Athens by a few of the brothers because 2 cities ago, they had a mob while he was in the synagogue, mobbed his doorway. Then he got brought to the next city where a whole bunch of Jews were mocking him and yelling at him anytime he was out in public. And he is in Athens, Greece. And Athens is the theological, philosophical, and cultural center of the world. So this is where all the great thinkers are, where all that stuff happens. Plato, Aristotle, they all come from Athens. Paul grew up in a place called Tarsus. That was called the Athens of the East. So he grew up in a place very similar to Athens. So he kind of knew the city. The court there was called the Areopagus. The Areopagus was made up of the lords that were of the surrounding area that during their rule, their actions were good. So they got to sit around and talk all day about the new ideas. And they were on the council for life. And I would say that that would be a great job, that every day for the rest of your life you get to sit around with a bunch of your buddies and just talk about all the different new ideas, all the new philosophies and all that. So before I get too deep into all the history, I'm going to get started talking about Acts. So in verse 16, Paul is walking around the city, and he can see that the whole city is full of idols, and that distresses him greatly. Athens was the center of Greek mythology, of all of those weird mystics that were there. They had the largest temples in the known world to their god of wisdom and like their main god Zeus. They had temples that were bigger than this church, and that was back when they were building with stone. So they had these big, huge temples, and Paul goes out into the synagogue in verse 17 and is preaching to the Jews. But the Jews still have the same problem of they're looking for a Messiah that already came. So then he goes into the marketplace, and day by day, Paul goes out and is preaching to the people that are there. So think of this marketplace as like Walmart. There's a bunch of people there. They have to go there every day, go get the food they need, they have to go get their stuff. So there's going to be a big, huge crowd there, all getting their stuff that they need for the day, all their different groceries, all of that. And Paul's just preaching to them, talking to them. And Paul was a tent maker. He knew the marketplace. He had grown up in a place where they had a large marketplace in Tarsus. So the marketplace was almost like home to him. Every city that it says that he went to, he was usually in the marketplace, fixing his tents and preaching. So he went every single day, and he preached and fixed his tents. So in the next verse, while he's preaching, a group of philosophers come up to him and just start arguing with him. And there's two groups, if you can read in there, the Epicureans and the Stoics. The Epicureans said that everything was about making life pleasurable, making life so it was pleasing. And their lives were very messed up because they couldn't even get into like a relationship because that could end badly, and that would make life not pleasurable. And so they also didn't believe in the gods at all. So there's a group called the Stoics that they believed everything in moderation. They couldn't eat too much food, they couldn't pray too much to this god, they couldn't do too much of this or that, because everything had to be in moderation. And just an interesting little fact is the Stoics, their name came from Stoic, which was the Greek root for the people who hang out on the porch. Because they would go outside, because it couldn't be too hot or too cold, they had to go outside and sit on the porch to hear all their teachings. Now you guys kind of know the people that Paul had to deal with every day. But yet he still kept on preaching, even though they had all these weird ideas. So they started to mock him and say that he's just a babbler, or say that he's just a seed picker, which is something that is, he picks a little thing from here and a little thing from here and creates this new religion. And they had people that were doing that all the time. And that's how they got the 2,000 or 3,000 gods in that one city. So, and then they said that he was talking about foreign gods, gods that were new. In Athens, it was a crime punishable by death if you brought up a new god or a new religion. So they took him to the Areopagus, which was that court that I talked about earlier, to find out what was going on. So then, in the next few verses, the Areopagus asked him, okay, what are you talking about? We've never heard of Jesus before, so you're bringing up some new god. And about half the council was those Epicureans or Stoic, and then the rest were following all these like 2,000 gods trying to figure out how do I gotta serve this one, and this one, when Paul was only preaching one. So this was something new to them. So the city was even named after one of their gods, Athena. So Paul's speech. Paul stands up in the middle of the Areopagus and he starts talking to them. This is like taking any one of you and going to Congress and having to stand up and give a speech. Now I know that I would be scared if I had to go stand up in front of Congress and give a big speech. But he stands up, no fear, and he goes up and does that. And then in his first sentence, he refutes both of their claims. He says, "Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. Now what you are worshiping as something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you." So first, he shows that he's only talking about the one thing. He's not just picking a couple things out of there. He shows that he's talking about God, and he also shows that he's not just bringing up something new, just coming up with his own new ideas. He's talking about something that they can get, that they're very religious. He compliments them. That's saying, I see that in every way you're very religious. That was a compliment. And he says that knowing that they'll know what he's talking about. So the next verses are good. It says, "The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by hands. And he is not served by human hands, as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else." I think that that's just crazy, that he knows his audience well enough that he can say this just right from there. He didn't have, like I do, he didn't have notes. He just goes out and he's preaching this. He knows that our God doesn't need this big temple. They had their big temples for him. They had to go sacrifice food to him every day. He knows that our God doesn't need that. He knows that our God doesn't need those masses of servants. He has everything he needs because he's given us all that we have.